All right, guys. So today we're going to talk about importing what are called libraries, which is basically just you don't have time or energy to write all the things that a computer does. So what we're going to do is use some code that someone else has written to execute some stuff. In this case, basically, in order to make anything I do from here on out interesting, I need some kind of random number generator stuff. And so that's the first library that I'm going to try to import. Okay, so when you want to get something out of a library, what you need to do is you need to know which library it is first. So I did a little Googling, right? And I came up with the library is random. It's actually called random, and here's the documentation from docs.python.org, which is a good place to go to get kind of exhaustive documentation. So there is a whole mess of stuff here that you can read. I'm gonna kind of point at a couple of things. I'm going to point at this random integer function that returns a random integer. And then I'm also going to point at this kind of rand range functions. Those are useful, as is the random function. So random returns a floating point number. So in order to talk about how those work, let me demonstrate how you get one. So one option is you could import the random library, just like this. So you just say, I want to import the random library. And then if you want to get at something, you do something like x is random.randint, and you can see it's already kind of auto-completing here. And I'll pick a random integer between 2 and 7. And you notice that when you do the random int function, it actually does include both endpoints. And then if I hit execute right there, I would expect it to do nothing, right? So just in keeping with good commenting, I'm going to comment as I go. So this imports the random library. This assigns a random integer between 2 and 7 to x, and then we're going to print the result here. So in order to print the result, we call the print function on the variable x, and we should see that this is basically acting like a die roller now. So I saw 3, I saw 4, I saw 7, I see 2. I haven't seen anything outside of the range between 2 and 7, so I haven't seen 6 yet, which is why I just keep doing this. There it is. Cool. Okay, so this is one method. Now, when you do this, you're going to find sorry, let me say that again. When you use random functions, you're probably going to find yourself using them a lot. And in that case, typing random.randint gets a little bit obnoxious. So if you want to import only some things and then not have to deal with this typing random every time, you can alternatively. So an alternate method would be to say from the random library, import the randint function. And now it's not going to make sense there, so I'm going to remove this. And actually, Okay. Let me, in good practice here, comment that line out. I'm going to copy and paste that. So if you import the entire library, then you need to say random.randint, and that's to keep the program from getting confused about which function you mean, because if you import several libraries, it's pretty possible that they might have overlapping function names. So you'd want to be careful, basically. Okay, so now I'm getting the same result. Okay, so there are a number of other functions in here. So you may look through this and see if there's something else you'd want. So suppose that I wanted the uniform, right? And so this pulls, okay, so uniform, it looks like pulls things uniformly between two values. So if I said, if I wanted that function, I could just list it here. So I'd just do from random import randint and uniform, and then I'd say something like y is uniform, and then let's see, maybe 1 to 3 random number. Okay, it looks like it might or might not include the endpoint depending on some kind of rounding value. I'm guessing that it'll probably include 3 here, but let's print out y and see what happens. Okay, so now you can see that it's kind of dumping out a floating point number. It's going to take me a long time to figure out whether this dumps out the number 3. Because as you can see, there are obviously very many choices for the values. And so it would be a little bit tedious for me to go through and see whether 3 comes out of this. If you read through the documentation, there's a number of like subtleties with random numbers. I would, if I was you, expect that sometimes you'll get something on one of the endpoints. Another way to do this would be to import the random function itself and then scale that up. So the random function itself results in a number between 0 and 1, not including 1. So if you wanted a number between, say, 5 and 8, that's a range of 3, so you'd multiply by 3 and then add to 5. So for instance, that would look like this. So if I wanted t to be a random number between 5 and 8, I would call random, which I'm going to need to import. So that's importing the random function from the random library, right? So I'd let t be a random number. So now t is going to be between 0 and 1. So if I'm trying to get t between 5 and 8, right, I'm going to get a random number between 0 and 1, and then I'm going to scale it up. And this is going to feel a little funky because what I'm doing is I'm taking t, multiplying it by 3, and then overwriting the old t. And I'm also going to add 5 there. Does that make sense? So this is, so get a random number from 0 to 1, not including 1, right? That's this line. And then once we multiply by 3, right, we'll have a random between, between 0 and 3, not including 3, right? Because 1 wasn't included, so now if we multiply by 3, 3 isn't included. And adding 5, I guess I should do something like this. That's a random number between 0 and 3, and then we add 5, and so now we get what we were looking for, a random number between 5 and 8. Oops. And it should be noted that that's a floating point number. So if I print my value t here, this way. So t is going to be the middle one now. Let's see. So there's 5 point something. Ooh, that was pretty close to 5. 5 is actually a possibility here, but 8 is not. So I might get a number quite close to 8, but I'm not actually going to get 8. And the reason you care is if you're going to subtract 8 and divide something by this, you'd be worried about division by 0 in some cases. So just to finalize my kind of comments here, get a random number using the uniform distribution between 1 and 3, maybe including both ends. I guess maybe including both ends is definitely a statement. Print the result. And I'm going to take this guy and put it up here where I actually... So now I have x is a random number between 2 and 7, and then we'll print that. And then y is a random number between 1 and 3, and we'll print that. And t is a random number between 0 and 1, and then it becomes transformed to a random number between 5 and 8, and then we'll print that. So I guess I should put a print the result here. Okay, so now I should have my random integer, my uniform distribution, and my random range. There is another function that we'll probably use fairly often in here, which is the choice function. We don't have a sequence to play with yet, but we'll have a sequence later. There's also a shuffle function, which is kind of nice. So we'll end up using a bunch of things out of the random library as time goes on here. Where's my... Okay. So if you have questions, feel free to, pop them in the Discord. This does occasionally cause issues. I'm gonna probably stick to the rand_int function most of the time. I would recommend that be your kind of go-to for generating die rolls and stuff. Using something else gets a little more complicated, but there's a place for that kind of thing.